Before I go into the details, let's talk about what is a Spark, basics. So Spark is one of the most popular big data frameworks, and it's actually has sort of become a norm in the industry that Spark, when it comes to data processing, everybody just goes to Spark. And when it comes to real-time streaming as well, Spark has been making a lot of noise. Spark used to have a lot of frameworks, such as uh, data streaming, as well as they actually introduced a new framework which was actually more towards real-time data streaming, which the earlier streaming platform was not. So they came up with something called uh, uh, structured streaming, and that actually supports, and actually, it rivals the Apache Flink framework. So it is very good, and it allows you to process data at any scale, and also process it in the real time. So if you have the click events coming in, you can process all the data for a customer, and you can probably uh, think about it as in the data can be analyzed at the same time, as well as sent to the user based on the, for example, if you want to some recommendation of any sort, then you can do it right away from the Spark structured streaming. And since Spark is very popular, and it has a very solid foundation, so it allows you to process data at any scale. It can process terabytes of data, and it support distributed processing, so you can run it on multiple nodes, and then all the data can be processed in minutes, even the terabytes of them. Apart from this, Spark also has support for machine learning. So Spark has this Spark mlib library, which allows you to, it doesn't support like it doesn't have support for all of the machine learning frameworks like you have in TensorFlow or PyTorch, but it has a lot of features of machine learning, and it is incorporated as part of Spark mlib library. It is all part of the core Spark framework. Okay, so when it comes to Spark, right, you can run your jobs in Spark, and Spark supports a lot of cluster managers. So it allows you to run in a lot of environments. Some of these environments are it allows you to run it as a standalone. So Spark, if you download an Spark application, so you can download the zip file from the Spark repo, and then you can just run it without any sort of environment, like any other cluster manager. You can just run it standalone. Then you can run it as on Apache Mesos as well. So it has the first class support for Apache Mesos. One of the most most used cluster management tool that was being used with Spark was Hadoop, yeah, Yarn. And so Yarn was the cluster, used to be the most preferred cluster manager. But that's when the Kubernetes came in. And with just one FYI, that Kubernetes support was there in Spark from, I think, 2.4.0 onwards. But it used to be in experimental. So it was not suggested to use Spark on Kubernetes in production environments. But from release 3.1.1 onwards, it is in GA, so you can use it in production environments as well. And that's amazing. um, all right. So how do you submit an Spark application? So whenever you write a Spark application, be it Spark structured streaming, Spark streaming, or a basic Spark code, which actually pulls the data from, let's say, S3 or GCS, then run some analysis, do some sort of aggregation. You can do all of that, but you have to use something called Spark Submit. And Spark application, for example, Spark entire Spark, the distribution, it comes with a lot of utility scripts. So one of those scripts is actually called Spark Summit. And what it's so if you whenever you download the Spark distribution, it will be inside of bin folder, and so then you can use /bin/Spark Submit, and then you can define the main class of your application, then the master. So here the master is for It could be master of your Apache Mesos or Yarn or Kubernetes cluster. But Spark supports two modes, client and cluster mode. So we are going to talk about Kubernetes cluster modes going forward. And then a lot of configuration, actually a ton of configuration. So I'm going to talk about it, why, how we can get rid of those configuration and do it in a better way in Kubernetes. So again, Spark has first class support for Kubernetes, but it all goes through Spark Submit. So everything that you want to run on Spark, you have to submit it using this CLI tool, that /bin/Spark Submit, and then give all the configuration options. Right. So how do you run Spark on Kubernetes? So what happens is, whenever you run your Spark on Kubernetes, uh, Spark Spark Submit contacts the API server on Kubernetes. So in the early example, I showed you that there's a part wherein you have to define the master URL. In that, whenever you are running Spark on Kubernetes, you have to give the Kubernetes API URL, so that the Spark can communicate to the Kubernetes API server, and that's where it will start, creating the Spark driver node, and then from Spark driver it will start creating the executor nodes, and the driver node is gonna manage your job on these executor pods, and they will just run. So it will be managed from one center place. So this is how it looks like. So the client communicates Spark Submit in this case. So in your laptop, whenever you do a Spark Submit and you give all those configuration options, you basically say that, hey Spark, I want to run my application on Kubernetes, and here's the address to the Kubernetes API server. So what it's gonna do is it's gonna use your credentials, communicate to the API server, provision some pods, a driver pod, and then provision some executor pods, and then the code would be transferred to the executor pods, and that's where they're gonna run your actual code in a distributed mode. Right. So how do you do this? When you want to submit your application on Spark using Spark Submit on Kubernetes, you have to give the address to the Kubernetes API server. So you have to say KTS colon double slash, then the API server host name and the port. So usually, if you're inside of the cluster, you do not have to do that. Uh, uh, because the it will always be the same. But let's say you are running it from somewhere else, and for example, if you're running it on EKS, for example, then EKS will have a different cluster address, and the API server URL would be different, and the port even would be different. So you have to provide it. Then you have to give the deployment mode. Deployment mode should always be cluster in case of Kubernetes, even though the client mode is supported, but there are a lot of restrictions on that, and you can run into a lot of limitations on that. So it's better to run always on cluster mode, and you have to give the name. How do what is the name of your Spark application? So when you give the name, right, the driver pod would come with something like Spark by driver, and the same name convention would be used for your executor pods as well. Now, then you have to give the class name. That is where you have to give the main class of your application. So in this case, for example, this is just an example for Spark by application, which actually Spark repository gives you as an example. So if you have a Spark main class, then give the you know main class file name here. Then you can give a lot of configuration options. Actually, Spark, since Kubernetes is vast, right? You can run deployments, you can run pods, and a pod has a lots of configuration. So all of those configuration will go here in the conf, and then in the end you have to have a jar wherein the code that you have mentioned as a class, it's there. So, as I mentioned that, again, whenever you are trying to submit an application on Kubernetes cluster, so basically the pod will come up, and the pod has to have all those details, right? For example, your image pull policy, what is the image? And if let's say you are pulling the image from a private repository, so you have to give the pull secrets as well. So all of these configurations, Spark has support for most of it, and some of them are not supported that I'm going to talk about later. So for example, you can give the container image, then the executor container image, everything. So you can basically customize a lot of things. But again, these are tons of options. So I mean, if you are doing it, it could be problematic if when you're doing it via the Spark Summit. And all the most of the configurations options are available in Spark configuration. So there's a particular document wherein you can find all of these and the details about it on what does it mean. For example, this one. So driver, right? So driver actually creates those pods. So when it creates those pods, it needs the cluster role or role wherein it has the permissions to create the pod. So that's where and the role has to be attached will be attached to a service account, and this service account in turn will be attached to your driver. So you have to give that service account name as well. So if you're not using any other tool, then you have to do all of that manually. Yeah. So it's a lot of work. I mean, whenever you are doing it with Spark Summit, it's quite a lot of work. Okay, so I think I already mentioned a lot of things that are problematic with Spark Summit. That when it comes to Kubernetes, um, it is hard to do things in a configuration manner. For example, if when I say configuration, I don't mean that by first, but instead of putting it as a command line option onto a command, for example, that we were doing in Spark Summit. So okay, now this is one of the problems that so let's say you want to define like 10 things for your pods. So you have to add all of those into your command, and then you have to append those arguments into your pod. And let's say you are running like 100 jobs. So for 100 jobs, you will have to write those command line arguments 100 times, and that's a lot of work. And it's Kubernetes. The whole point of Kubernetes is Kubernetes has a lot of like it has a lot of tools like customize, and then it has Helm also. So it actually allows you to to customize a lot of things, and that's where it is very easy to use Kubernetes. And if you're using Spark Summit, then that all goes into drain, so you can't do that. So but we have a solution for this, and what's the solution? It is Spark on K-test operator. So okay, so some folks at Google created this operator and they have open sourced it, and the good thing is that they're actively maintaining it. So Spark on K-test operator is based basically on Kubernetes operator. So Kubernetes operator is the way of sort of using something called mutating web admission webhook, which allows you to intercept requests and then updating the pod spec. For example, let's say I have written an operator wherein what it does is just a very particular example, that if in AWS we have to add this X-ray as a as a sidecar container everywhere, and that's where this comes in, that you have to uh, you have to add that everywhere, right? And this is just simple line of code, but you have to add it in each and every deployment and pod. And so how do you do it automatically? So I can create a Kubernetes operator which actually does this. It will use a mutating webhook which will update the pod spec, and it will add all those details into your update, add the sidecar container of X-ray into all the pods. So that's one of the use cases for a mutating admission webhook. So this in this case, Spark on Kubernetes works on the same principle. It updates your pod spec based on the certain details, and it provides a CRD called Spark application and scheduled Spark application. I'm gonna be primarily talking about scheduled Spark application in particular in this talk. Okay, so apart from this, Spark on K-test operator also comes with something called Spark CTL. So I'm sure if you guys are a fan of Kubernetes, then kube control is just heaven. I mean, it makes your work so easy, right? And that's where Spark on Kubernetes operator also comes with a command line tool, which actually helps you to maintain and manage these Spark applications. Okay, how does it work really? So we create a YAML manifest of a custom resource, that is in this case Spark application, and then we submit it to the cluster, and when we submit it to the cluster, uh, what happens is the mutating webhook kicks in. Because the operator is running, and what it does is it actually creates a particular stateful set and the pod, and those pods are running on your cluster as a driver pod and executor pods, and it maintains them. So they are not independent. They are being maintained and created and deleted by the operator itself. So that's what the entire workflow of Spark on Kubernetes operator. So how do you install the Spark on Kubernetes operator? You can install it using Helm. So they have a very good, they have a very good installation wherein you can just add the repo, Helm repo, right? You know that Helm has deprecated the central Helm repo, so you can just use so everybody has to use their own repo now. So you can add their own Spark operator repo, and then you can install it using Helm upgrade and Helm install, or Helm install, and or Helm upgrade. Helm upgrade for subsequent installation, any updates, and Helm install is for the first time installation. But you can run this upgrade space dash dash install command for it works for first time and subsequent times as well. So that's where you have to define the release name. Then you have to give the Helm chart, that is Spark operator slash Spark operator. Okay. Now in this case, I'm installing Spark in namespace Spark. So that's where since if it's not there, but I'm giving the option of dash dash create dash namespace. So it's gonna create it automatically if it's not there. Okay. By default, this operator doesn't have the webhook enabled. So what happens is, so when I say that webhook is not enabled, then it's not gonna update your pod specs with a lot of other things that you have created. But uh, so it will just manage the life cycle of your driver and executor pods. But you have to explicitly set it to webhook.enable. That's where it's going to create a certificate and add it so that it can use it for updating your pod spec. Okay, one important thing here that so you have to tell the Spark operator where do you intend to run those Spark jobs. Reason, because when you install this KTS operator, it sort of creates a role and role binding, which allows it to manage the resources in that namespace. So that's why it needs you to specify the Spark job namespace. Okay, it is also a sort of if you're since in this case I'm using Spark namespace to install the operator as well as to run the jobs as well. So in this case, it is redundant that you don't have to specify it. But if you let's say if you are installing the Spark operator in Spark operator namespace and running the jobs in Spark namespace, then you have to specify the Spark job namespace here. Okay. Then next thing is you can also so what happens is whenever you're doing this default installation, the service account that comes in that you have to use everywhere in your in your Spark application whenever you are writing the Spark application in manifest. So the service account will the name would be something like your release dash Spark. So in this case, it would come as Spark operator dash Spark. So that looks weird. So you can just override it by specifying this value service counts dot spark dot names equal to Spark. I always try to set the log level to higher value so that when you're doing it, you know what is going on into the operator, and how it's getting those details, and what is it doing. Basically, it's very important for you to debug any jobs, whether it is updating them or not, whether it's updating the pod spec or not, what is it doing, whether it's even getting those intercepted requests or not. So all those details are captured in the log. So you can tune the log levels based on your comfort level of how you want to debug or not. Then again, you have to define the version of this operator, and then just wait for it to be installed. So this is how you do a Spark on KTS operator installation. Right. Let's see how to write these Spark application, this CRD. So, okay, this is quite a lot of code actually. So I couldn't just put a YAML here. So I just added a screenshot. So I'm not sure if it's visible, but Basically, all you have to do is to, for let's say, if you're creating a pod, so you have to create a, uh, application. You say API version is equal to v1, and then you say kind is equal to pod. Similarly, here, since we are creating a CRD of Spark application, so here you have to specify the kind as Spark application and the API version. So API version could be Spark operator dot io slash v1 beta 1 or v1 beta 2. So they have multiple versions. So each and every version has different functionalities. So you can use any of it. And then you have to specify the namespace. So in this case, when I installed Spark, I gave the namespace as Spark. So then I have to specify the namespace Spark here as well. If I do not do that, your Spark operator will never be able to intercept those requests and create your driver and executor pods. Then in the spec, you have to define what type of application is it. Is it a Scala or Python? So in this case, it's a Scala-based application. So you can define the cluster mode as cluster. Then you have to define a image. Then you have to, so in this case, this gcr.io slash spark operator slash version Spark v1 v3.1.1, it already has this Spark examples.jar. So that's what I'm running, and it has the this jar has the code wherein there's a main class Spark and then once you do that, you actually have to define the Spark version as well. And with that Spark version, what's going to happen is it will actually, because you are setting that Spark version, it will your application has to be compatible with that, so you have to set it. Then you have to define the driver and executor details, like how many cores do you want to allocate to the driver pods, how many cores do you want to allocate to the executor pods, and how many instances. And you can define the memory as well. And then the labels, for example, let's say you want to, whenever, so executor pods will be a lot, let's say, based on your whatever values you're setting in the instances. So you can set a label as well in the executor pods, and that would be helpful when you're debugging, see all the logs of from all the executor pods at once. Okay, how do you, so once you have you once you create this Spark Pi application, you create this manifest, all you have to do is to do a control kube control apply dash f and this YAML file. That's it. And then your application has been submitted to the cluster. Now, once you have submitted this application, you can actually describe the status of this application using this command kube control n spark describe, and then basically you have to define the namespace that you want to describe Spark applications, and then you can get the status. So it will give you all the details of whether application has started or not, and any error. So it is actually very useful in case of Spark application, that all the details would be right there. So if you want to debug your Spark application, whether it's running or not, what is the status, everything, or if any executor pods failed and all, it would be right there in the Spark applications describe. So when you describe it, you will get all the details right there. Then again, so whenever you submit an application, it will have its own UI. So you can access that UI as well. As I mentioned that it creates a, so every time you submit an application, it will create a UI service for specifically for that application with the naming convention of your name, your application name dash UI dash HCC. So your application name actually plays a crucial role here. So your executor pods and your driver pods will also come with the same name, and then you can do a port forward to that service, and you will be able to access the Spark UI. Okay, now, no, no, here's the tricky part. Now you don't have to do all these things, do run kube control, uh, port forward and all. Spark, as I mentioned, Spark has Spark on Kubernetes operator has this very nice command line interface. It's called Spark CTL, and it allows you to do everything that you do using kube control, but in a lesser arguments. For example, if you want to see the okay, before you could even use it actually, so you cannot download it using Brew or anything. So you have to actually build it on your local. So this is how you build it. You have to just clone the repo, just go into the folder on Spark CTL, which is right there into the Spark on Kubernetes operator repo, and then do a go build, and then it will create the binary in your bin file. Now, If you want to list the sources, it is as simple as spark-ctl list dash n spark. So it will list all the Spark applications available in this cluster. You don't have to specifically say kube control n spark list, get and Spark application, an entire big word. You don't have to do that. Okay. Apart from that, you can actually check the status with the spark-ctl as well. You can do a spark-ctl status and the same thing, the name of your application and the namespace that you are running, that you have submitted that Spark application in. Good thing about this is it actually provides you a very good way of getting all those logs in one manner. You don't have to do a slash dash L in, like, just like to get all the executor pod and the label to get the executor pod logs. You can just use sparkctl to get all those logs by just sparkctl log sparkpy dash n spark. That will give you all the logs from the executor pods. That's very helpful when you are running some Spark structure streaming jobs and all. Okay, so apart from this, you can access the UI as well. So you can just say sparkctl forward Spark UI and then the namespace dash n and the Spark namespace.